Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have Allison Rimm and we're talking about her book, The Joy of Strategy, a Business Plan for Life. And we're going to be talking about why it's so important to have a business plan because you can make so many more informed decisions in your life, whether it's about figuring out what you want to do in the week at work or how to make career decisions. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about careers and how you could actually use your life plan and this book, The Joyous Strategy, a Business Plan for Life, to make career decisions that are important to you. So welcome, Allison.
Thanks for having me, CJ. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what a business plan, for those who are unfamiliar with the business plan, what is a business plan and how is it helpful for someone to have a business plan?
Sure. So I've really discovered over the years in my life as a career executive and a coach that having a plan, making a plan is really necessary for any kind of project or organization to be helpful. They all have a business plan and a strategic plan, which starts with a mission, with their sense of purpose and why they exist. And over the years, I've counseled and coached and mentored hundreds and hundreds of people, and I discovered that those people who find not only success, but soul-satisfying success, have a sense of their own mission and their own purpose. And I realized that if we can put together and use the same framework that we use to help an organization be successful, then we can help them look at their life as a project with a purpose and set them on a path that will get them where they really want to go.
Now, I know in working at companies, trying to figure out your vision and your purpose is one of the hardest things to do. It could take weeks, months even, and lots of revisioning and, all these kinds to the point that you get dizzy with the number of options on who you are and what you're supposed why you're here on earth. Give us a couple examples, and I think we've seen, business mission statements and visions, but what would a personal vision statement or mission statement sound like?
It can be really very simple, and what you're talking about is really true. So for anybody who is listening, who is like my husband, who hears the word strategic plan and thinks, "Oh, I'd rather have a colonoscopy,"
Right.
it really doesn't have to be that hard.
Well, he really doesn't like doing them because colonoscopies are awful.
Oh, no, 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 no. And, for people who've been through the strategic planning process, some organizations don't really come up with a product that's really usable. And what they end up with is like a 3-inch binder that just goes up on the shelf and it's so giant and dense. Nobody ever looks at it again.
Right.
And that's not at all what we're trying to do. And in fact, I've distilled the process in my book down to 8 simple steps because looking at your life is pretty hard work. Yeah. So the process that guides you through it ought to be very, very simple.
Yeah.
So when we look at creating a mission statement, I love to use Matthew Kelly's definition of what a mission is, a personal mission. And he says in his book, Perfectly Yourself, that your personal mission is where your talents and your passions collide with the needs of others and the world. And I think that just distills it down to its very basic essence. And so I try to work with folks to help them figure out what their talents are and what they really love doing. And then they can think about how they can put them to use in a meaningful way. And that is a really beautiful way and very simple, can be very, very quick to establish your purpose.
Yeah, I actually have an exercise I do with a client, and I get them into like their happiest experience, and then they're completely blissed out, and then I say, like, so what's your purpose? And they're like, what? And I say, no, don't go there. Go back into your heart space. And 9 out of 10, very few times do people go, wow, that's crazy. I mean, they're shocked because within one hour session, it doesn't have to take weeks or months even. It can actually, and I think one of the things that you have in your book, The Joyous Strategy, is that it could be actually a placeholder, and it's something that evolves over time. Because I was looking at my mission and purpose that I literally have done over the last, I don't know how many years, probably 8 to 10 years, and I can look at the mission statement that I did 8 years ago and look at it today, and there's still a core that rides throughout the whole thing, but it's had these slight variations over time. But I literally sat after reading your book, I went and read every single mission statement and vision statement, and they're very similar.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I don't know. Do you find that too with your clients? That
Yeah. Well, typically, and this is true for an organization as well as people, generally speaking, people have a pretty good idea once they've gone through this process of what they think their mission is. And it tends to, just like you described, maybe vary very slightly, a few edits here and there. You grow, you change, maybe you get a little better at writing and prose. But the basic essence of who CJ is or who somebody is and what they value and what they think they really want to accomplish here tends to change very little.
yeah,
Their vision, maybe their definition of success looks like when they've carried out that mission might evolve a little bit more,
yeah,
or their approach to doing that might evolve and change. And one of the things that I tried to do in this book is to create a process that allows you to go back over and over, just like you say, maybe every year, check in to see if you're still on track, and question whether where you are today reflects where you were last year, and gives you an easy way to update it and make sure that you stay on a deliberate path so that you're headed toward where you really want to go.
yeah. Do you have your mission or vision statement that you could share with us? I know you shared with it in the book, or are you okay with me reading it?
Please read it because I wasn't ready for the pop quiz.
Oh gosh, isn't this ingrained in your head? No, because I think actually what happens is that you do have a statement that kind of changes over time, but it's not for me. I create it, and then it's kind of a touch point where I think I'm still there, and I go, okay, I'm still there. No changes needed in my life. I'm still there. Okay, I'm trying to figure out. All right, I'm going to give you a couple of other ones in here. So here's an example of a person that you have, a hypothetical person in your book named Sandra. So
She's a real person.
She is a person.
Real,
okay.
absolutely.
All right. So Sandra's personal vision was, I have a loving husband and 2 happy children who are self-confident and aware of themselves. We laugh and love together every day. I'm instrumental in developing and leading the inpatient and outpatient diabetes wellness center at my hospital. These are folks at Mass General Hospital, where you used to be in head of strategic planning. I grew the center from its nascent stages to the award-winning center it is today. I'm the co-founder of the Fertility Within Reach, a successful nonprofit organization aimed at helping individuals who are impacted by a disease of infertility to become their very best advocate, to be their own best advocates for change. And then I'm not going to go into the whole, because it's long, about her work. And then she says, I enjoy my vast network of friends, each of whom brings me something different. We laugh together, support each other, and help each other grow. And what I love about this vision statement, it's not just like a work, it's a vision about your entire life. It talks about her family, it talks about her work, and it talks about her friends and community.
So I'm thrilled to actually that you chose Sandra's vision statement for a couple of reasons. One is it's an excellent example, as you say, of having a very holistic look at your life. So when you're doing a vision statement, you should be painting a vivid verbal picture of what you would like your life to look like. Mm-hmm. And it's really, you're envisioning maybe sometime in the future, but you'll notice that she wrote it in the present tense, mm-hmm. because I'm a real firm believer that if you can see it, you can be it. Mm-hmm. And what you put your attention on is where you put your energy and your focus. So you have the pleasure of enjoying the idea of where you're going to be, right. And B, you're keeping that front and center. So as you're looking at creating the reality that you want, you're going to put your energy, your attention, and your focus on getting that stuff done. Right. So what happened, and the other thing that she did really, really well is that many people who take my workshops, and this is where Sandra put this together in a Business of Life workshop on which this book is based, are looking for life balance, work, mm-hmm. life. They want to look at their career, their families, their community involvements, and importantly, their mind, body, and spirit that needs mm-hmm. to be taken care of. So you'll notice in Sandra's vision statement, she addressed all of those people. She had herself laughing and loving and having fun, all the while she's had these incredibly ambitious professional pursuits, but her family is front and center. That's where it begins. That's where it ends. Now, the other reason that Sandra is such an excellent example is that she's a real doer. She's the kind of person who's this power executive, jumps right in, gets things done, boom, 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 boom. She's got people all over working for her in different physical locations. And for her, the vision statement was a real showstopper. She had never really stopped to say,
Mm-hmm.
what do I want the whole of all of my efforts and my team's efforts and my family's efforts to add up to? What do I want it to look like? And as soon as she was able to articulate that as carefully as she did in her vision statement, something very interesting happened.
Mm-hmm.
She launched her nonprofit, Fertility Within
Ooh, wow, you
Reach.
gave me chills. Wow.
Yes, a full 5 years ahead of schedule.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills all over my body. That's incredible.
Yeah, so by just
Wow.
focusing her very prodigious energy,
Yes.
she really surprised herself and a lot of others of how
Wow.
quickly she could get that work done.
Okay, we have a ton of questions from the audience about, it sounds about vision statements. So
Great.
one was, what if we change and how do we stick to our vision statement? Because, we're always changing and evolving. That was our first question.
Yes. Well, it's a wonderful question. And what I ask people to do who take my courses and read the book is actually put a recurring appointment on your calendar, maybe monthly,
Oh, I love it.
quarterly, and remind yourself to go back and look at it, because absolutely you grow, you change, you learn things, and those might really shift what you are going to consider to be successful as you learn that maybe there are more possibilities open to you than you knew about when you initially wrote that. So constantly coming back to it, or regularly coming back to it, is a really great idea. It's also a wonderful tool to say, is what I'm doing, is how I'm spending my time, and the way I am conducting my work or my family and relationships really in harmony with my vision. And
Hmm.
it's an opportunity to recalibrate over and over again,
Yeah.
to keep bringing yourself back to your
And
intention.
life changes, so I had a vision statement and my kids were, 0 to 5, and then I would say from 5 to 12, and now our kids are teenagers and probably going to go off to college in 5 years from now. And my husband and I literally this morning during breakfast were talking about, well, what do we want our lives to be like 5 years from now? I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm a Uber planner, but so my vision is literally changing because our kids will be gone and my life will be different. So that would be my answer to what if we change and how do we stick to the strategy. I think that I'm hearing how you stick to the strategy is continually have touch points where you're reviewing it and seeing, are my decisions, are the ways I spend my time congruent with that. Now we have another question that says, should we set time limits on things?
Okay, so there are two things. I just want to finish off, and it's the time piece that goes back to the previous question,
Yeah.
which oftentimes what people ask me is, what time horizon should you have on your vision statement? How
Yes.
far out should it be? Okay, so that's really part of this. And by continuously revising it, then you don't even have to really answer that question. However,
Ah,
the
yes.
answer really is, it depends based on how big your vision is and how big the project is that you have ahead of you. So if you're looking at your kids going off to college in 5 years or so, that's a really great window, because you're going to be facing a seismic shift in
Yes.
what your life is like at home and where you're going to need to put your energies when your kids are no longer in the
Yeah.
house. I have a 15-year-old, so, and my oldest daughter's already in college, so I've
Okay.
been thinking about dogs myself. But what am I going to do with all my house?
Yeah, and I
Now,
think it's important, like, because I was talking to my husband, because it's changing and I've been evolving, and literally your book, The Joy of Strategies, helped me kind of go through and say, what's happening? And I thought, our lives are going to be different 5 years from now, and what are we going to do? What does our life look like, and where do we want it to be? Okay, so the question, I think we've already answered the second question, which is how often should you revise a strategy? I'm hearing put it in your calendar. Do you do it monthly, or what did you say, monthly?
well, it depends. Some people like to do it monthly or quarterly. I like to just take a quick peek at it every month or so,
Hmm.
just because I have my goals laid out there, and I just want to keep looking at them and make sure that they're still relevant.
Right.
The second question, though, said, should there be time limits on them?
Yeah.
And I'm a real advocate for what we call SMART goals in the business
Yeah.
world, having them really specific, measurable,
Yeah.
attainable, realistic, and time bound.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. So for anybody in the world who's ever made a New Year's resolution and
Yes.
had forgotten about it by the time they finished drinking their champagne at
Exactly.
midnight, consider this. How many people say, "Oh, I'm going to lose weight this year,"
Right.
and then forget it. It doesn't happen. But what if you said, "I'm going to lose 10 pounds by March 31st by going to the gym at least 3 times a week, putting more vegetables on my plate with every meal, and limiting myself to dessert twice a week?"
Right.
How much more likely do you think you're going to be to actually lose the weight if you have a specific plan and you keep checking in every few weeks to make sure that you're tracking toward your
Right, and
goal?
those things may change. Maybe you think,
They
well,
might.
actually, it's not the vegetables so much as not eating the carbs. You know what I mean? Those things are
Whatever.
they're markers, right? So that if you actually have that goal of, by this date, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, and I'm going to do these 3 strategies, right, to do it. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to exercise more. Those things can change over time within that between then and your goal, but at least you're conscious of it versus kind of having it as this, I will lose weight kind
Right.
of, which
Well,
seems like a nebulous thing.
exactly. And to your point, you know what? Maybe the 3 strategies you chose aren't going to really work for you. Maybe it turns out that you have a different kind of metabolism and the vegetables aren't going to
Exactly.
help.
Yeah. Maybe you
So
need to eat more protein. Maybe it's not
whatever
vegetables.
it is. So the beauty of this is that if you're tracking your weight loss and you get to the middle of January and the scale hasn't budged, maybe you say, "Oh, let me just try something else on my list of strategies
Right. Those
and
three
see if that
strategies
approach."
aren't working, or maybe there's something else. Okay, so here's another question. So, folks want to know if you have your online workshop. I know that you mentioned that you set people through this workshop face to face. Do you have an online version of that?
It's a great question. It's on my list.
I could tell by your look it was on your list. It was like, oh, yes, I'm going to get to that.
It's one of my goals, and you caught me. I better make it specific.
This is the universe talking to you, right, Allison?
A
Yeah,
lot.
get on it.
I
Start doing some of
know.
these priority exercises. Okay, so what if life changes unexpectedly? How do you adjust? So there are times where your parent or child or spouse gets sick. All of a sudden you have these goals and visions, and you need to tend to your loved one. How do you work with those? And you yourself had your own personal
I
experience with this too.
certainly did. In fact, that life happens. And that was really what led me to meditate very seriously. In fact, I can tell you kind of a sad and funny story at the same time. But I had a string of very poignant, harrowing personal losses, followed by a pregnancy with my son that I just told you is 15. So that part has a happy ending.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the whole time I was pregnant with him if he was going to live or die. And in the middle of that, my husband received a diagnosis that was life threatening, and we had to deal with that. And so here I am faced with the prospect of losing everything that I love the most. And I was pregnant and under so much stress. Really, frankly, if I hadn't been pregnant, I probably would have been drinking myself silly every night. But that wasn't an option,
Yeah.
and I found meditation and exercise as a really wonderful way to deal with the stress. And in meditating, I realized, you know what? Our life here on this planet is very short. We don't know how long we have. It can end in an instant. And I fully believe that we're sent here with a mission of some sort. And I better figure out what mine is and start acting before time runs out. So it can be actually something, these life events can be something that you take advantage of because they can focus you in on what's really most important and help you weed out all of the extraneous noise.
So your vision and mission then changed when this life event happened, I assume.
They sure did. They sure did. They made me really think about how do I approach my relationships. I could never really accept people's help. I think a lot of people are like, you think you're the A student, and I can handle it all. I don't, so I don't have to let people help me. Well, I got to a point where I had my husband in one hospital and my son in another, and my daughter at home. I could not physically be everywhere I was required, and I joke sometimes that I'm the spiritual remedial student,
Right.
and I have to be knocked upside the head so hard before I concede that I need to let other people in. But lo and behold, it really did strengthen and deepen my relationships with my loved ones when I could let them give to me for a change.
Yeah, so sometimes when life thinks, so what I'm hearing is when life happens unexpectedly, view it as a wake-up call and a way for you to completely reevaluate your vision and mission, because that's what it is. It's somehow, maybe these are all your things that you want to manifest, but life has a bigger or different plan for you. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'll tell you something very, very interesting that I discovered when all of this happened. And here I'm trying to write this book, and silly me, I'm a senior vice president at Massachusetts General Hospital. It's one of the largest, most complex organizations. I was in charge of departments that had hundreds of people, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of budgets to manage. I had a big job. I had 2 kids at home, and I'm trying to write my book.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It never occurred to me that something had to give. And then I had this other experience with my family, and I went back and looked at my vision statement when I'm thinking, what's going to give? And I realized that as much as I loved my job and working for the hospital, the words Massachusetts General Hospital did not exist in my vision statement. And
Whoa.
that was my first clue that
Yes.
it might be time to move on. And I'd been there for 16 years, so to sort of even entertain the idea that it's time to move on is really hard sometimes when you're in such a comfortable spot.
Yeah. All right. Wow. We have a bunch of other questions from listeners. This is generating thousands of questions here.
Great.
Okay.
Come on.
So how often should you rethink things? And I think it's, like you said, it kind of depends if you want to be looking at it quarterly or monthly. But probably, I find like you want to do it at least once a year. I don't know. What do you find?
You do. I think it really depends on your life circumstances. So it's interesting hearing from people who've read the book. I've got many people who are toward the end of their career and they're contemplating what they want to do in retirement. So that's got a different window. I've got students who are thinking about what are they going to do when they finish school. So that's going to dictate their window. So I would just say, think about your circumstances and what makes sense for you.
Right.
And how much do you really want to think about this and commit to that process and do what feels right for you.
Yeah, so it's going to vary, especially during depending on the context of your life.
Exactly.
All right, so how many years should one plan for? How many years should you plan for? Should one? Oh, how many years should one plan for? Yeah, I guess so. So how many? And that's a good question. I think what that means is, when you're visioning something, are you looking out 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What's the time horizon? That's what I assume that question is. And if it wasn't, please write back, listener, whoever asked that question.
So again, I have to say that depends, and it depends on what the context of your life and where you're headed. So if you look in the book, or when I have people go through these workshops, I have people look at short, medium, and long-term horizons. So what are you doing right now? And it's also not just your goals during this period, but what are your priorities? So here's a really important thing. We need to look immediately, right now, to make sure we've got a decent balance. And what I often see from people who are taking my workshops is that they attend to everything else. And if they have time at the end of the day, which they never do, they'll get to mind, body, spirit activities. So unless you're really mindful,
right,
the exercise thing is the first thing that falls off of the to-do list. So looking at current right now to make sure that you're balanced and you're taking care of your body and your vehicle and your spirit is really critical, because that's what's going to keep you fueled for the long haul. So then we can look at the middle term, which for many people is like 1 to 5 years, and then maybe beyond 5 years. But again, it depends on what you're doing. So I gave an example that if your goal is to play piano at Carnegie Hall and you don't know how to play the piano, that might be a 10-year horizon.
Right.
Set that goal out there for 10 years. And then let's look at what you have to be doing now in the short term and in the medium term to be able to achieve that goal, and set milestones and specific goals again that are going to keep you making steady progress toward achieving that goal. If your project that you're talking about is cleaning up the garage, then you might have a 1 month. So, and the beauty of this methodology is you can use it for any project, even the project of your life, and it's the size and the enormity of the goal and the distance between where you are and where you're headed that's going to dictate the window and the vision. Yeah. So a rule of thumb I find very useful is to be aggressive enough so that it puts some positive pressure on you and doesn't. If you say, oh, I'll get to something in
6 months
years,
from now, or
forget it.
yeah,
It's just not going to happen.
yeah,
So you want to put some pressure on yourself and keep yourself moving, motivated, and keep momentum on your side. But don't be so aggressive that it's undoable and it will end up frustrating you and making you walk away.
yeah.
So that's the balance you're looking
Yeah, and
for.
I actually, one thing that I'll add, and I think you mentioned this earlier about the story with Sandra when we were reading her vision statement, is oftentimes just the process of committing it to paper. You know, she probably didn't think she was going to have this infertility clinic for many, many years, and just the process of writing it down accelerated it'll happen. And this is the magic of this work, is that just committing it to paper and focusing your mind on one thing, sometimes some of these goals, which you think are 5 to 10 years. I mean, she probably thought that was 5 to 10 years out, right? But it manifested way sooner.
She had so many things. And this woman is a go-getter. So let
Yeah.
me just tell you, like, do you think she rested on her laurels when she launched her nonprofit? No, she got herself into graduate school and is working on an MBA.
Yeah.
So the woman moves. But what it did was it focused her energy and said, oh, you know, once I really looked at the steps it's going to actually take me to set up my 501c3 corporation and put the pieces in place, it actually isn't going to take that long. And it just, like you say, focused her energy and made her take the action steps required to make it come to fruition.
We have so many questions from long ago, 14 minutes ago, but let's see if we haven't answered them yet. What if we don't meet the plan in the time allotted? So oftentimes, you know, like we talk about the weight loss one, and you said by this date I'm going to lose the weight, and you don't. And I think what I heard you say is if you don't, first of all, the only thing I would say is don't beat yourself up. Yeah. What we often do is like, oh, I didn't do that, I'm so blah, 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 you know, come up with all these like self-defeating statements. First of all, don't do that.
Right. So I'll tell you, I am a real optimist.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really love about a strategic plan is that if you're really headed, if you're focused on a vision, that vision's out in the future. And being forward looking is a very optimistic thing to do. So try it, everybody, and you'll see what I mean. Now, as a leader in an organization or somebody who's leading your own life, here's something to note, that part of being a leader is making a decision with the best information that you have available to you at the time. It may not be sufficient to make a perfect decision. So you try it out, and then you evaluate if it's working. That's why I'm a real fan of having these little milestones. Yeah. So if you set out to lose weight and you didn't, then let's go back and look at what you did that wasn't working and go back and see what else is on your list of strategies you might try and try another one. Yeah. And just consider the period in which you did not lose weight as an opportunity to collect information and to evaluate that data and see what it was that was holding you back so you can adjust your strategy.
Absolutely. One of the things that I have to remind myself and my clients is when you get that and you're like, it's not working, you don't view it as failure so much as feedback. I think our natural go-to place to say, oh, I failed, therefore this whole thing is messed up and I'm not going to do anything at all. It's just feedback. So if you go back to the example of I want to lose, 10 pounds by this particular date, you have 3 strategies, they don't work, then you say, well, I'm getting feedback that these 3 strategies aren't working. I'm moving forward because now I know I can eliminate these 3 and move to the next 3, or keep this one and move to the, find 2 other ones. I mean, I think that that's one of the key things when you don't, because you won't. I mean, sometimes you won't, and sometimes you will. And I can't even tell you what percentage of times you will or won't, but sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. Life happens and they don't, So I think it's about, one, giving yourself slack, giving yourself love, and just viewing this as feedback versus failure. That would be my only tip. Do you have any other ones?
Yeah, I mean, I might sometimes when I'm working with a client who's in this situation, sometimes the love I give them is a little bit tough love and say, you know what, you've got feedback.
Yes.
You've tried some things, but let's look at your own behaviors too and see what you're doing to sabotage yourself and see if you can get to the root of why you're doing that and get past that as well, because all the vegetables in the world aren't going to work for you until you really have your mind in the place where you love, honor, and respect yourself enough to make the investment in creating the habits and the lifestyle that you really need and deserve.
Yeah.
And some people need to work on that before they'll really stick to a plan.
Yeah, so it's actually looking at their sabotaging behaviors, which probably map to some, fundamental belief that they have about themselves or about life or whatever, but examining kind of those behavioral psychological issues.
Exactly. There's a whole chapter in the book that talks about fear-based behaviors that get in our own way of getting where we want to go. We oftentimes cut off our possibilities just because we fear that they're not doable. But if we can step back and look at what we're worried about, then we can often find a strategy to deal with things.
Yes, actually, one of the strategies that you have in the Joyous Strategy, your book, we're talking to Allison Rimm, and we're talking about her book when you're talking about the chapters. I love one of the exercises. The first time I've seen it's a Toyota one where you ask the 5 whys.
Right.
Why am I not losing the weight? Well, because I can't make it a priority. Well, why can't you make it a priority? Well, because the kids have all these different things, or have too many things on my schedule. Well, why do you have too many things on your schedule? Well, because I often overbook myself. Okay, well, why do you overbook yourself? Because I always prioritize myself last.
Right.
Why do you prioritize yourself last? Because ultimately, I feel like my needs don't matter. Aha!
There you go.
There you go, right? And that's one of the most powerful exercises. It's really simple. You just ask yourself, that was 5 whys. Now, I don't know if it may be 6 or 7, but I think if you really dig deep, you get to the answer pretty quickly.
You really do. And oftentimes the answer to the last one is, oh, I'm afraid I'll displease somebody else if I say no to them.
Yes. Yes.
And so that disease to please is a really pernicious fear-based behavior.
Yes.
Now, going back to my lesson as the spiritual remedial person,
yes.
I have to get to the point where everything on my to-do list is going to require 600 hours per day, and I only have 24.
Yes.
So once I realize I can't say yes to everything and everyone, then you're forced to say no to something else. Right. And so if you have a plan and you have a vision, this is really important for people with this situation.
People pleasing.
This people pleasing or any other self-sabotaging behavior. When you look at your vision statement and then you look at what your to-do list is, what it allows you to do is enables you to decide what you want to say yes to. Right? So people who can't say no to anybody have a much easier time saying yes to something else. And then you can be much more objective when you get to the end of what's on your to-do list and what you can manage in a reasonable day. You have to say no to everything else. But it gives you a much nicer way to be able to approach the person who's requesting something that's not on your priority list to say, I would really love to do that, except I just don't have time because I'm previously committed.
Yes, and I love that. I think that one of the things that you have in your book, the Joy Strategy, the Joy Strategy, a Business Plan for Life, is the different things that people do. So people pleasing is one, where you just have to say no. There's the perfectionist control freak, which I relate to. But it's one of those things where you just you have to, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to do that. It's not perfect yet enough. It's not good enough. I need to just go out and do this and this and this before I finish my goal. That's what I think that's perfectionist. And you have the Serenity Prayer as a solution to that. What is that?
The Serenity Prayer really is looking at what we can control. So people who really want to go back and try to fix everything or control everything find themselves spinning their wheels a lot of the time. I think it was Einstein who said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. When you can't control the outcome, there's absolutely grace in letting go, so you can free up the time and the effort you would be spending on something that you can't control and putting it towards something that will bring you a good result. And remember, we started this by saying that we're looking for soul-satisfying success, not just checking things off of a to-do list. We're looking for those things that really bring us true joy and satisfaction, and that needs to have a really focused purpose and a vision that keeps us in line with that, so that we're acting in accordance with what we really want. So the Serenity Prayer, it really just helps you to determine what is it that help me to change the things that I can to What is it? To let go of the things I can't and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's like,
I
that
see.
comes into
Okay, got
play.
it. It's kind of reminding yourself, like, I can't do everything. I can't boil the ocean here, so I need to be smart about what I can do and what I can't do.
Right. You cannot necessarily change somebody else's opinion of you, for example, but I've had plenty of clients who spent a lot of time just trying to get somebody to think different of them, and it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And really, when it got to the bottom of it, it didn't really matter all that much.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so there's a couple questions related to this, and don't worry, we're going to go back to answering some of the earlier questions, but folks wanted to know that how do you stop yourself from taking yourself out of things? So it's kind of an opposite. Instead of saying no, um, you kind of just say no to everything. Um,
Yeah. So I think this might sound like another one of these fear-based behaviors that I call the abbott habit.
okay.
Yeah, I really want that job, but I'll never get it because I'm older, I have gray hair, and they're going to want to hire these young so-and-sos to come and work in this tech-savvy environment. And that's actually a scenario of an actual client that I worked with
Hmm.
where he was all excited about this brilliant, wonderful professional opportunity that he wasn't even going to apply for because he was so convinced he wouldn't get it. And I said, "Oh, not so fast." He was
Yeah.
like ready to apply for all these jobs that he found mind-numbingly boring.
Oh
Why would you do
no.
that?
Yes.
So I said, let's just look at all of your butts. And the idea was to get off your butt and get moving. But let's look at those butts, all of your reservations, and let's challenge your belief and see if that's really true. And if it is, then let's come up with a strategy for addressing it. And then you'll be prepared for that interview when you go forward. But the notion, I thought this was really interesting that his gray hair was a liability. I actually pointed out to him that the position that he was interested in that organization was a senior leadership job
Right.
that would require the
We
wisdom that
want the gray
comes
hair.
with age. That gray hair is an asset in that
Right.
environment. What he needed to do was have the wisdom to put a plan in place and to assemble a team of those young 20 and 30 somethings that
Right.
could come in, but it was up to him to provide the vision and the framework and the guidance to corral their talents and their strengths to generate the product that they were looking for. And coming fresh out of school, while their skills were necessary, they're not prepared to be able to create that sort of vision. So he, sure enough, once we finished going through that list, found the courage to apply for the job. Was a little shocked and terrified when he got an interview. We practiced and practiced and practiced, and that's one way to get over this fear is to really prepare and to look at every objection that he could possibly anticipate, come up with an answer. And he came back to me afterwards and said, sure enough, the CEO had me on the ropes at one point, but I remembered what we said. And when he
Oh,
hit me
great.
those curveballs, I hit him out of the park, and
Yeah.
he got the job.
Yeah. So I hear if you have the yeah but, which is like you're not saying yes to life and you're saying no, it's usually mapped to some, in my parlance, I would think it's like certain limiting thoughts or unhelpful thoughts that you have about yourself, about life in general. And it's to get clear, because I think oftentimes they're not even conscious about those thoughts. They just run in our background as a unhelpful tape playing in our head. So just even
Absolutely.
identifying, I'm old, I'm not going to do it. And when you start really dragging those thoughts into the light of awareness, a lot of them, even just a process of, and then testing them, like, really? Is that really true? So every CEO or every CFO or whatever at a tech company doesn't have gray hair. Like, let's look at these pictures. Is this true? I don't think so. These all look like old guys. You know what I mean? So I think that it's often when I hear that it is about these self-sabotaging beliefs. It's not necessarily behaviors in that case. It's beliefs. That's what I'm hearing on that one.
They
Okay.
go together.
So how do you recognize self-sabotaging things? Ah, okay.
Wow, that's a good question. You've
Yeah.
got to look in the mirror and be really honest. If you're not getting a result that you want, then what are you doing? How are you acting? And are you acting, if you're really honest with yourself, are you acting in a way that's moving you toward what you want or away from it?
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to look in the mirror.
Yeah. I
I
think
actually,
it's easy when you have a business plan, right? Because if you have a business plan, you
sure.
can say, am I doing these things that are my goals? And if I'm not, what behaviors am I doing? And you can probably look at those other behaviors, and they're probably self-sabotaging behaviors, I think.
It's a very good clue. You're right, because when you have a really well articulated specific vision of what you want, then you can see whether your actions are moving you toward that lovely vision or away from it.
Yeah.
I never really thought I would quote my mother when I was coaching people, but she used to always say, and because she saw these behaviors in her adorable young daughter, that if, and I was very shy and I was fearful and I wouldn't go for things that I want. And she would say to me, honey, if you go for it and you try, you might not get it. You really might, you might be disappointed. But if you don't even try, then you're guaranteed to be disappointed. And that's what I really focus people on. If you've put something in your vision and you're really committed to finding it, to making it come to life, then you've got to find the courage and arm yourself with the tools to be able to go forward with confidence. Really just go for it and give it all you got.
So, thank you so much, listeners. We have a ton of questions. We're going to try to get to all of them. There have been a couple of questions like, what's the process? How do I do this on myself? How do I actually find my mission and purpose on my own? And how do I figure out how many strategies should I do? How do I start the process? Is there a step-by-step process to do that? And yay, there is. The Joy of Strategy, A Business Plan for Life, Allison Rimm in her book has a bunch of different, there's 8 steps and actually a whole bunch, is that right, 8 steps?
That's correct.
And then within each of the steps are a whole bunch of exercises. And the way that I see these exercises that, like you said in the very earlier segment, is like, some of them will land on you, some of them will be like, this doesn't register. But if you do all those exercises, you will get at the answer, I think.
You will. You will. And I will say to people, this doesn't have to take forever. In fact, one version of the workshop I teach is just one day, and we go through a lot of this. So you can really get a lot done very quickly. What I will say to people is there's going to be some part of the process that's uncomfortable to you and that you're going to resist doing. And when you find yourself going, no, I don't want to do that, or that doesn't matter to me, that's what you really need to pay attention to and dive into it with both feet, because what we resist persists, right. And that's usually the uncomfortable areas that we really need to address in order to move forward.
Yep. So I have a bunch of other questions. I'm trying to figure out how to distill this down, but tell us, there are a bunch of people who want to know about mission and purpose, and I think that that's one of the hardest things to answer, right? That's what many people on their spiritual paths are trying to ask. Right. Why am I even here? What am I supposed to do?
All we're asking for you to do is figure out the meaning for life. I don't know what the big deal is all about.
Do it in a day or so.
Absolutely. I so relate to this angst, and it, like I told the story before in the earlier segment, took a lot of meditation for me to find my purpose and my passion, which really led to the creation of this book. But I do remember thinking, if one more person tells me to follow my bliss, I'm going to scream. But I really found this very simple exercise, and it's in the book. I'll tell you, anybody can do it, and it's really quick. Just think of one accomplishment of which you're very proud. And it could be anything. It could be something in business. It could be you made a beautiful meal, you threw a great party. It could be anything. And then think about, what is it about you and what talents did you call upon in order to be successful in that endeavor, whatever it was. And then write those things down. And then think about what you enjoyed about it. Right. And then if we go back to Matthew Kelly's definition of your purpose or your personal mission being the place where your talents and passions collide with the needs of others in the world, then you can start thinking about, look at all the things that I'm really good at, and how do those things line up with a cause or a population that I care a lot about, and what can I do to make a difference using my prodigious talents?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's getting to what brings you joy, because fundamentally I believe that a person is designed for a particular purpose, and that we actually know in our hearts what that purpose is, but we may not be following it because we may have lots of different things that make us happy. But if you really tune into what's in your heart, what brings you joy, something that you did really well, it's in there, and it's just about examining those particular experiences and pulling out like, I actually did this. For me, it was when I was in college, I created a humor festival, and I just loved doing that because it was organizing people, bringing people together to laugh, to have fun, and to enjoy life. And so That's basically what I'm doing now.
Well, see, that's perfect. And CJ, this is why I'm so excited about talking to you because, I'm all about joy and laughter. The word laughter appears in my personal mission and vision statements. And I think that's really important. So another thing that I counsel people to do is think of a peak experience or several peak experiences. At what moments were you happiest and feeling most connected to somebody else or a purpose, or what was bringing you real joy, and examine what was happening in that moment and what do you want to do. And for one of those, I just remember setting somebody up. I won't bother you with the details, but where I just caught this guy in a moment that was so hilarious with a big group of people who loved him watching, and everybody erupted in laughter and brought the house down, and I dined on that for months. It was just such a joy to be laughing so hard. And so that was a real clue to me that whatever I do, my days have to be filled with the music of laughter, or just joyful.
Beautiful. And it can be as simple as that.
Simple as that.
And like I said earlier, sometimes they're just placeholders, but literally I've looked at those placeholders that I put in literally 8 years ago, and they're still the same. They're still the same because deep inside, I think people really, really know if they can get into, like you were talking about, that meditative space where you went when you actually had a really, challenging wake-up call, when you really, really get into that deep place and you think about your peak experience, which is the highest highlight of your happiness, and you think about what those things are, you will get to, whether it's, and I've taken, I don't know, hundreds of clients through this peak experience exercise, and they literally, you would think they'd say the same 5 things. And I'll say to them, like, when they're all meditated and zoned out and relaxed, I'm like, what's your purpose in life? And they're like, connection, love, joy, bringing people together. And, then I'll come up with another person, leave 5 completely different things. I mean, it's kind of an amazing process. But when you really get into that heart space and that meditative space, I think that's where the alchemy and real juice comes in, I think. So it's possible. And I actually, what wonderful questions. These are juicy, good questions. I'm loving it. Okay, we have Allison Rimm, who's the author of The Joyous Strategy, A Business Plan for Life. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was a blast. Good, because as long as you're having fun, then that's good. As long as I'm having fun, that's really great. Okay, so next week we're going to be talking to Kristen Neff, and we're going to be talking about her book, Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. So everyone, have a wonderful week, and we will see you next Wednesday at 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you again, Allison.
Thanks.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show, and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.